Standing in my cap and gown, holding my acceptance letter to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, I approached my parents at our family cafe. My heart pounded as I showed them the financial aid package. I needed $12,000 for my first year. Dad wiped flour from his hands, looked me dead in the eye, and said the words that shattered my world. "We're not paying a single dollar for your college gym. You're staying here to work at the family cafe. That's your future." Mom nodded silently, crushing my dreams with her silence. 6 months had passed since that devastating conversation, and every morning felt like walking into a prison. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30, pulling me from dreams where I walked across Northwestern's campus with my books in hand, attending lectures on business management and economics. Instead, I stumbled into the kitchen of Romano's family cafe, tying an apron around my waist that felt more like a noose around my neck. The routine never changed. Prep vegetables for the lunch rush. Stock the coffee machines. Clean the grease traps that made my stomach turn. Take inventory of supplies while my father barked orders about portion control and waste management. Every task felt designed to remind me that this was my ceiling, my limitation, my permanent address in life. Gym, Table 7 needs their check. My mother called from behind the register, her voice carrying that tone of resigned acceptance. She had convinced herself this was normal, that keeping me here was somehow an act of love rather than suffocation. I grabbed the leather folder and walked past the corner booth where old Mr. Peterson sat with his newspaper. The same booth where I used to do homework after school while dreaming of college applications. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. During my lunch break, I sat in the storage room scrolling through social media posts from my former classmates. Danny was pledging a fraternity at Ohio State. Jessica had made the dean's list at Michigan. Brad was studying abroad in London, posting pictures of himself in front of Big Ben, with a huge smile on his face. Each post felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. "You're wasting time on that phone," Dad said, appearing in the doorway with grease stains on his shirt. "The delivery truck is here. Go help unload the supplies." I shoved boxes of canned tomatoes and industrial-sized bags of flour into the storage area, my back aching from the repetitive motion. This was supposed to be temporary. This was supposed to be a gap year while I figured out funding. But every day that passed made college feel more like a fantasy and less like a possibility. That evening, while organizing receipts in the cramped office above the cafe, I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. As I gathered them from the floor, a bank statement caught my attention. The account name read, Sarah's Future Fund, and the balance made my blood run cold. $18,473. My hands trembled as I rifled through more documents hidden in the filing cabinet. Monthly deposits of $300. Investment portfolio statements showing steady growth. College savings plans with my sister's name prominently displayed at the top of each page. They had been lying to me for months. Every time I mentioned needing money for college, they claimed poverty. Every time I suggested taking out loans, they insisted the family couldn't afford the additional financial burden. But here was a proof that they had been systematically saving money for my sister's education while telling me to abandon mine. The office door creaked open, and my mother's footsteps echoed on the wooden stairs. "Jim, what are you doing up here so late?" she asked, her voice filled with suspicion. I held up the bank statement, my voice barely controlled. "What is this, Mom?" Her face went pale, then quickly shifted to defensive anger. "That's private family business. You have no right to go through those files." No right. I stood up so fast, the chair rolled backward and hit the wall. I have no right to know that you've been saving money for Sarah's college while telling me we're too poor to help with mine. Sarah is different, she said, crossing her arms and lifting her chin with that stubborn expression I knew so well. She's academic material. She's been planning for college since middle school. You're more practical, more suited for hands-on work. More suited. The words came out as a shout before I could stop myself. I had a 3.7 GPA. I scored 1,200 on the SATs. I got accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship. How is that not academic material? Lower your voice, she hissed, glancing toward the stairs. Your father doesn't need to hear this. But it was too late. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs and Dad appeared in the doorway, his face red with exhaustion and irritation. What's all the yelling about? He demanded. I thrust the bank statement toward him. Apparently, you've had money for college all along. You just decided I wasn't worth spending it on. Dad's eyes scanned the paper. Then he looked at my mother with an expression I couldn't read. When he turned back to me, his voice was cold and final. That money is for Sarah's future. She's been working toward college her entire life. She takes advanced placement classes. She volunteers at the hospital. She has direction and ambition. And I don't, I laughed bitterly. I worked 30 hours a week here while maintaining honor roll grades. I captained the debate team. I organized the senior class fundraiser that brought in $4,000 for the scholarship fund. That's different, Mom interjected. The cafe needs you. This is family business. This is legacy. Legacy. I stared at them, both seeing clearly for the first time how little they thought of me. This isn't legacy. This is a trap. You're keeping me here because you need cheap labor, not because you believe in me. Dad's jaw tightened. You're being ungrateful and dramatic. We've given you a job, a purpose, a place in the family business. Most kids would be thankful for that security. Most kids don't have parents who sabotage their dreams, I shot back. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Dad turned and walked toward the stairs. You'll understand when you're older, he said without looking back. College is expensive and uncertain. This cafe is reliable income. We're protecting you from making a mistake you can't afford. That night, I lay on my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to my parents' muffled voices through the thin walls. I caught fragments of their conversation. Financial responsibility, family obligations, Sarah's potential, my limitations. For the first time since graduation day, I started making a different kind of plan. If they wouldn't help me build the future I wanted, I would find another way to build it myself. The next morning, I walked into the cafe with a new sense of determination. I would work their shifts and save their money. I would smile at their customers and serve their food. But I would also be planning my escape from this trap they had built around my life. During my break, I overheard my parents on the phone with someone from Sarah's school. They were discussing advanced placement testing fees, college preparatory programs, and private tutoring sessions. The total cost they casually agreed to pay was more than my entire Northwestern scholarship gap. As I listened to them invest in my sister's future while keeping me chained to their past, I realized something important. They hadn't just denied me money for college. They had denied me their belief in my potential, and that was something I would have to find elsewhere. The December cold bit through my jacket as I walked across the community college parking lot, clutching a folder full of financial aid applications and transcripts. For 3 months, I had been secretly meeting with admissions counselors, learning about independent student status and alternative funding options. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had explained that if I could prove financial independence from my parents, I would qualify for significantly more aid. The problem was proving independence while still living under their roof and working at their cafe. I needed to find a way to support myself completely, which seemed impossible on the wages they paid me. That's when Marcus changed everything. Marcus Thompson was the delivery driver for our food distributor, a guy in his late 20s with an easy smile and an entrepreneurial spirit that reminded me of everything I wanted to be. He drove the refrigerated truck that brought our weekly supplies, and over the months of signing receipts and checking orders, we had developed an unlikely friendship. "You look miserable every time I see you," he said one Thursday afternoon, hefting a case of olive oil onto his dolly. "What's eating at you, man?" I found myself telling him everything. The college rejection, the hidden savings account, the feeling of being trapped in a life that felt too small for my ambitions. Marcus listened without judgment, nodding occasionally and asking thoughtful questions. "Oh, he said, leaning against the loading dock, "I've got a couch in my apartment. It's not much, but it's free if you need a place to crash while you figure things out. I've been looking for someone to split utilities anyway." The offer hit me like lightning. A way out. A chance to establish true independence. I couldn't impose like that, I said, though every fiber of my being wanted to say yes. "It's not imposing if it helps us both," Marcus replied. "Besides, I think you've got more potential than this place is letting you use. Sometimes you've got to take a leap to find out what you're really capable of." That night, I researched everything about independent student status, financial aid eligibility, and community college transfer programs. The path was clear, but required courage I wasn't sure I possessed. I would need to move out, support myself completely, and prove to the government that my parents provided no financial assistance whatsoever. For weeks, I planned in secret. I started picking up shifts at Tony's Pizzeria across town, telling my parents I was working longer hours at the cafe. Tony paid cash for weekend work, and slowly I built up enough money for a security deposit and basic necessities. The turning point came on a busy Saturday, when Sarah returned home from her boarding school for winter break. She bounced into the cafe wearing a designer coat I knew cost more than my monthly wages, her arms full of shopping bags from expensive stores. "Jim," she squealed, throwing her arms around me in a hug that smelled like expensive perfume. "I missed you so much. Wait until you hear about my college interviews. I met with admissions representatives from Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. Dad flew out with me for the campus visits." My stomach dropped. Campus visits, flights, hotels, interview coaching. The expenses they were casually absorbing for her were exactly the kind of support they claimed they couldn't provide for me. "That's great, Sarah," I managed, forcing a smile. "How did they go?" "Amazing." The Harvard interview went so well that the admissions officer said I was exactly what they were looking for. Can you believe it? Me at Harvard? She spun around, her shopping bags swinging. "Mom and Dad bought me a whole new wardrobe for interviews. Professional clothes are so expensive, but they said image matters for these things." Every word felt like a slap. Professional clothes, campus visits, interview preparation. These weren't necessities for education. They were investments in success that my parents considered worthwhile only for one of their children. During Sarah's winter break, the contrast became unbearable. She slept until noon while I worked the morning shift. She spent afternoons shopping with Mom while I scrubbed grease off the grill. She received private tutoring for her SAT retakes, while I calculated inventory costs and balanced registers. The final straw came during our annual New Year's Eve family gathering. Extended family crowded into the cafe after closing hours, sharing food and stories, while children played between the tables. Uncle Robert asked about my college plans, apparently unaware of the family drama. "Jim's staying here to help with the family business," Dad announced proudly, as if this had been my choice. He's got a good head for the practical side of things. Not everyone needs a college degree to be successful. But wasn't he accepted to Northwestern? Aunt Lisa asked, confusion evident in her voice. College isn't for everyone. Mom jumped in quickly. Jim's more suited for hands-on work. He's always been better with his hands than with books. The lies came so easily to them. The revision of my academic achievements into something lesser, more manageable, more convenient for their narrative. I stood in the corner wearing my stained work clothes while Sarah showed off her new dress to cousins who congratulated her on her bright future. Actually, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I was accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship. I needed $12,000 in additional funding, but Mom and Dad decided not to provide it. The room went silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Children continued playing, unaware of the tension that had suddenly filled the space. A gym. Dad's voice carried a warning tone. This isn't the time or place. When is the time? I asked, stepping forward. When is the appropriate time to talk about the fact that you have $18,000 saved for Sarah's college, but claimed poverty when I needed 12? Gasps echoed through the room. Uncle Robert and Aunt Lisa exchanged meaningful glances. Sarah's face went white as she realized the implications of what I was saying. "You're embarrassing the family," Mom hissed. "I'm telling the truth," I replied. "Something that seems to be in short supply around here." Dad's face turned red with anger and humiliation. "If you can't appreciate what we've provided for you, if you can't respect this family and this business, then maybe you should find somewhere else to live." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone waited to see how I would respond. This was the moment I had been unconsciously preparing for the confrontation that would either break me or set me free. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll be out by tomorrow." "Jim, wait." Sarah started, but I was already walking toward the door. "Don't be ridiculous." Mom called after me. "You don't have anywhere to go." I turned back one final time, looking at the room full of relatives who had just witnessed my parents choose humiliation over honesty, control over support. "Actually, I do," I said. "And unlike this place where I'm going, people believe in my potential instead of trying to limit it." I walked out into the cold December night, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Behind me, the cafe buzzed with uncomfortable conversations and whispered explanations. Ahead of me lay uncertainty, independence, and the terrifying freedom of building my own future. Marcus answered his phone on the second ring. "Hey man, remember that offer about the couch? I'm ready to take you up on it if it's still available." "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. "Come on over. We'll figure everything out." As I walked through the empty streets carrying a backpack with my few possessions, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. For the first time since graduation day, I was moving towards something instead of just enduring something. My parents had finally given me exactly what I needed most: complete independence and the legal right to claim it. The couch in Marcus's apartment became my launching pad into a completely different life. His place was a modest two-bedroom unit above a hardware store with thin walls that let in every sound from the busy street below. But it was mine in a way the cafe had never been. Here, nobody questioned my ambitions or treated my dreams like inconvenient fantasies. Marcus worked as an independent contractor, delivering for multiple food distributors, and occasionally driving for a moving company. His schedule was unpredictable, which meant I often had the apartment to myself for studying. Within a week of moving out, I had completed my community college enrollment and qualified for maximum financial aid as an independent student. The freedom was intoxicating and terrifying. Every morning, I woke up knowing that my success or failure depended entirely on my own choices. No safety net. No family business to fall back on. Just me, my determination, and the opportunity to prove what I was really capable of achieving. I enrolled in 15 credit hours while working multiple jobs to cover rent and living expenses. Monday through Wednesday, I attended classes macroeconomics, business, calculus composition, and introduction to accounting. Thursday through Sunday, I worked security at a 24-hour storage facility, a job that paid $12 an hour and allowed me to study during quiet periods. Weekends brought catering gigs through a local company that served corporate events and wedding receptions. The work was physically demanding, but paid well, and I learned about food service from a completely different perspective. Instead of being trapped behind a grill in a small cafe, I worked large-scale events where precision timing and teamwork created memorable experiences for hundreds of people. The contrast with my old life was stark. At the storage facility, my supervisor Jerry treated me with respect and encouraged me to use downtime productively. During catering events, the head chef Rosa praised my work ethic and began teaching me advanced food preparation techniques that went far beyond anything I had learned at the family cafe. "You've got good instincts," Rosa told me one Saturday after we had successfully served dinner for a corporate awards banquet. "Have you ever thought about culinary school or restaurant management?" The question sparked something I hadn't expected. For months, I had been focused solely on escaping food service, viewing it as the trap my parents had tried to keep me in. But working with Rosa showed me that food service could be art business and creativity combined in ways I had never imagined. "Actually," I said, "I'm studying business with the idea of maybe opening my own restaurant someday." Rosa's eyes lit up. "Now, that's interesting. You know, most people who want to own restaurants have never actually worked in them. You've got the practical experience and you're getting the business education. That's a powerful combination." Her encouragement planted a seed that grew stronger with each passing week. During slow nights at the storage facility, I started researching the restaurant industry, reading about successful entrepreneurs who had built empires from single locations, studying business models and market trends. Marcus noticed my growing pile of industry magazines and printouts. "You're getting serious about this restaurant idea, aren't you?" he asked one Thursday evening, finding me surrounded by spreadsheets and business plan templates. "Maybe," I admitted. "I keep thinking about all the things I learned at the family cafe, but doing them better, more efficiently, with better food and service. What would you do differently?" The question opened a floodgate. I told him about the outdated systems at Romano's, the resistance to change the focus on cutting costs rather than improving quality. I described my ideas for streamlined operations, better supplier relationships, and menu innovation that could attract younger customers while maintaining traditional appeal. "Sounds like you need a test kitchen," Marcus said thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" "Well, you're working all these catering gigs, learning different techniques, and seeing what works with different crowds. What if we started small, like a food truck or catering business? Test your ideas before committing to a full restaurant." The suggestion hit me like inspiration. Food trucks required much lower startup costs than restaurants, but could serve as proving grounds for concepts and recipes. I could build a customer base, refine my approach, and generate capital for larger ventures. That night, I called my academic advisor and added food science and entrepreneurship courses to my schedule for the spring semester. If I was going to do this, I wanted to do it with the proper foundation in both culinary arts and business management. Spring semester brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities. Professor Williams, who taught small business development, assigned a semester-long project creating a comprehensive business plan for a startup venture. When I proposed a food truck concept, she was immediately interested. "Food trucks are an excellent case study," she said during office hours. "Low barriers to entry, but high competition. Success depends on location analysis, cost control, and brand differentiation. What's your unique value proposition?" Over the following weeks, I developed what would become the foundation of my future success. The concept combined traditional American comfort food with international flavors, using high-quality ingredients and creative preparation methods. The target market was young professionals who wanted quick, affordable meals that didn't sacrifice taste or nutrition. Marcus became my unofficial business partner, contributing his knowledge of logistics and distribution. His experience with food delivery gave him insights into traffic patterns, peak demand times, and optimal locations that proved invaluable for my business plan. By mid-semester, our theoretical food truck had become a serious possibility. I had identified suppliers, calculated startup costs, and mapped out potential routes through the downtown business district. Professor Williams was so impressed with my research that she recommended me for a small business development grant offered through the university. The grant application required letters of recommendation, financial projections, and a detailed explanation of how the business would contribute to local economic development. As I worked on the application, I realized how much I had changed since leaving the family cafe. 6 months ago, I had been trapped in someone else's vision of my limitations. Now, I was creating my own vision of unlimited possibilities. The night I submitted the grant application, Marcus and I sat on his apartment steps sharing a pizza and talking about the future. "You know what's funny?" he said, taking a bite of pepperoni slice. "When I first met you, you seemed like you were just going through the motions, like you were waiting for someone else to give you permission to want something. I admitted. I spent so long listening to other people tell me what I was good at and what I wasn't that I stopped trusting my own judgment. And now, I looked down the street at the neighborhood where I had started rebuilding my life. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I had earned it through my own work and determination. Now I know that the only permission I need is my own." 3 weeks later, I received a call that changed everything. The Small Business Development Grant had been approved for $8,000, enough to purchase a used food truck and cover initial operating expenses. As I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with excitement, I realized that my parents' rejection had given me something more valuable than college funding. It had given me the motivation to become completely self-reliant and the freedom to pursue dreams that were entirely my own. For the first time since leaving home, I wondered what they would think when they learned about my success. But the thought came without anger or resentment. I was too busy building my future to waste energy dwelling on their limitations. The food truck was just the beginning. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. This was what real opportunity felt like, and I was ready to grab it with both hands. 2 years after purchasing our first food truck, Marcus and I stood outside the leasing office for what would become our permanent restaurant location. The space was perfect, a corner building in the downtown arts district with large windows, outdoor seating potential, and foot traffic from nearby offices and galleries. Romano's Downtown Kitchen. I said, testing how the name sounded. "What do you think?" Marcus grinned. "I think your parents are going to have some interesting feelings about you keeping their name." The irony wasn't lost on me. After everything they had done to keep me trapped in their small vision of success, I was now using the Romano name to build something far beyond anything they had imagined. But it felt right. This was my heritage, too. My family legacy. And I was going to honor it properly. Our food truck business had exceeded every projection. What started as a single vehicle serving downtown lunch crowds had grown into 3 trucks covering different parts of the city. We employed 12 people, had corporate catering contracts with 6 major companies, and maintained a 4.8-star rating across all review platforms. The key had been refusing to compromise on quality while maximizing efficiency. Every recipe was tested and refined until it could be prepared quickly without sacrificing flavor. Every operational system was streamlined to reduce waste and increase profit margins. Every employee was trained not just to serve food, but to create positive customer experiences that generated repeat business and word-of-mouth marketing. Amy Chen had joined our team 6 months earlier as head of marketing and business development. We met when her firm was hired to develop a social media strategy for the food trucks, and I was immediately impressed by her understanding of brand building and customer engagement. She was brilliant-driven and shared my vision for growing the business beyond its current success. "The downtown location is perfect for your next phase," she said as we walked through the empty restaurant space. "You've proven the concept with the trucks. Now you can showcase the full experience table service expanded menu wine pairings, the complete Romano's downtown kitchen vision." Amy understood something that my parents never had. Success wasn't about playing it safe or limiting yourself to what seemed manageable. Success came from identifying opportunities, taking calculated risks, and executing plans with precision and dedication. Over dinner that evening, Amy and I reviewed the restaurant build-out timeline. Construction would take 3 months. Staff hiring and training would take another month. Menu development and supplier relationships were already in place thanks to the food truck operations. "There's something else we should discuss." Amy said, her tone shifting to something more personal. "I've been thinking about this for weeks and I need to say it. What we're building together isn't just professional, at least not for me." My heart raced as I met her eyes across the table. The chemistry between us had been building for months, but I had been hesitant to complicate our business relationship with personal feelings. "I feel it too," I admitted. But I didn't want to assume anything or make work awkward if I was misreading signals. "You weren't misreading anything," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I think we're building something special in multiple ways. That night marked the beginning of both a romantic relationship and an even stronger business partnership. Amy moved from consultant to co-owner, bringing marketing expertise and financial resources that accelerated our expansion plans. 3 months later, Romano's downtown kitchen opened to a packed house. The local food critic gave us 4 stars, praising our innovative approach to comfort food classics and impeccable service standards. Within a week, we were booked solid for weekend dinner reservations and had a waiting list for our popular weekend brunch. The success felt surreal. Just 3 years earlier, I had been washing dishes at my family's struggling cafe, listening to lectures about being practical and accepting limitations. Now, I was running a restaurant that generated more revenue in a month than the family cafe earned in a year. During this time, I maintained complete separation from my family. They had made their position clear. I was ungrateful, impractical, and destined for failure. I saw no reason to update them on my progress or seek their approval for choices they would never understand. Occasionally, I received updates through extended family members. Sarah had been accepted to Harvard with full financial support from our parents. The family cafe was struggling with increased competition from chain restaurants and delivery apps. Dad had been talking about retirement, but couldn't afford to close the business without selling it. The information reached me without emotional impact. I wished them well, but their struggles weren't my responsibility. I had learned to build success without their support, and their failures weren't mine to solve. One particularly busy Saturday night at the restaurant, I was expediting orders in the kitchen when Marcus burst through the door with excitement written across his face. "You're not going to believe this," he said, waving an envelope. "We just got invited to cater the mayor's annual charity gala. 500 guests, full menu showcase, television coverage. This is huge." The opportunity represented everything we had worked toward. High-profile exposure networking with the city's business leaders and validation that Romano's downtown kitchen had become a legitimate player in the local restaurant scene. Preparing for the gala required weeks of planning and preparation. We developed a specialized menu featuring our signature dishes adapted for large-scale service. Amy coordinated with event planners, photographers, and local media outlets. Our entire team worked overtime to ensure every detail would be perfect. The night of the gala, I stood in the convention center kitchen coordinating the service of appetizers to 500 of the city's most influential residents. The mayor's introduction mentioned Romano's downtown kitchen as an example of entrepreneurial excellence and community commitment. As I watched our staff serve our food to judges, business owners, politicians, and community leaders, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Every rejection, every late night, studying every 12-hour workday had contributed to this success. Amy found me during a brief, quiet moment between courses. "Proud of what you've built?" she asked, slipping her arm around my waist. Proud of what we've built," I corrected. "None of this would have been possible without the team we've assembled." "Speaking of the team," she said with a mysterious smile, "I have something to tell you. I've been waiting for the right moment." Before she could continue, our head chef called for my attention from across the kitchen. The main course service was beginning, and I needed to coordinate the final preparations. "Hold that thought," I said, kissing her quickly before diving back into the controlled chaos of high-end catering. Later that evening, after the last guest had been served and the equipment had been loaded back into our trucks, Amy and I sat on the convention center, loading dock, sharing a bottle of champagne. So, what was it you wanted to tell me earlier? I asked. I've been offered a partnership opportunity with a restaurant group in Chicago, she said quietly. They want me to head up expansion for a chain of upscale casual dining concepts. My stomach dropped. Chicago was 800 miles away. The opportunity would be career-defining for Amy, but it would also end our personal and professional partnership. That's incredible, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What are you thinking about it? I'm thinking, she said, turning to face me directly, that I'd rather build something here with someone I love than chase someone else's vision somewhere else. Relief flooded through me as she continued. But I want to make sure you're ready for the level of commitment I'm talking about. Business partnership is one thing. Life partnership is something else entirely. I looked at this remarkable woman who had helped me build dreams I hadn't even known I was capable of having. 6 months ago, I had been focused solely on proving my worth through business success. Now, I understood that real success meant finding someone who believed in your potential and wanted to build a future together. I'm ready, I said, for all of it. As we kissed under the stars, I realized that my parents' rejection had led me not just to professional success, but to a life partnership with someone who valued my ambitions instead of trying to limit them. The family that had refused to invest in my education had inadvertently given me the motivation to build something far better than anything they could have imagined. And I was just getting started. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing profit and loss statements for the restaurant's first quarter. Amy and I were planning our wedding for the following spring, and the business was exceeding all performance projections. Life felt perfectly balanced until I saw the caller ID, Mom. I hadn't spoken to either of my parents in over 3 years. Their last communication had been a terse Christmas card with no personal message, just their signatures beneath a generic holiday greeting. Now, suddenly, Mom was calling me during business hours. Hello, I answered cautiously. Jim. Oh, sweetheart, it's so good to hear your voice. She said, her tone artificially bright and cheerful, as if we had spoken just last week. How are you doing? I hear you're doing well for yourself. The casual familiarity was jarring. No acknowledgement of the years of silence. No apology for the circumstances that had led to our estrangement. Just an immediate assumption that we could pick up as if nothing had happened. I'm fine, Mom. What can I do for you? Well, I'm calling with such exciting news. Sarah's getting married. Can you believe it? Our little girl is all grown up and planning the most beautiful wedding. I felt a familiar twist of resentment at the phrase, our little girl, as if I had never been their child at all. But I kept my voice neutral. That's nice. Congratulations to Sarah. Oh, she's so excited, and the wedding is going to be absolutely magical. They're planning a destination ceremony in Hawaii, right on the beach at sunset. 3 days of celebrations with all the family. The photos are going to be stunning. As she described Sarah's wedding plans in elaborate detail, I began to understand why she was calling. This wasn't about reconnecting with her son. This was about money. The thing is, she continued, her voice shifting to a more serious tone. Weddings are so expensive these days, especially destination weddings. We want to give Sarah the perfect day. You know she deserves everything we can provide. I'm sure she does, I said flatly. Well, we've been talking to family members about contributing to the wedding expenses. Everyone wants to pitch in to make this special for Sarah. And since you're doing so well with your little restaurant business, we thought you might want to contribute too. Little restaurant business. The casual dismissal of everything I had built was so perfectly typical that I almost laughed. "How much are you thinking?" I asked. "Well, since you're family and you've been so successful, we were thinking maybe $45,000 would be appropriate. That would cover the photography and videography packages." $45,000. For photography at a wedding for someone who had never once called to ask how I was doing or whether I needed anything during the most challenging years of my life. $45,000, I repeated. "That's interesting. I know it sounds like a lot, but this is Sarah's special day. She's always looked up to you, Jim. She would be so touched to know that her big brother helped make her wedding perfect." The manipulation was breathtaking. Sarah had never looked up to me. During our childhood, she had been the favored child who received everything while I received lectures about being practical. Now, suddenly, I was her devoted big brother, who should be honored to subsidize her elaborate celebration. "Mom, let me ask you something. Do you remember when I needed $12,000 for college?" Silence stretched across the phone line. "That was different," she finally said. "That was about choices and priorities. This is about family." So my education wasn't about family. Jim, I don't want to rehash old arguments. We did what we thought was best at the time. Can't we focus on the present? Sarah's wedding is next month and we need to finalize the financial arrangements. Before I could respond, I heard Dad's voice in the background, and then he was on the phone. "Jim, your mother tells me you're being difficult about contributing to your sister's wedding." "I haven't said anything yet," I replied. "She asked for $45,000 and I'm still processing the request." "Look, son, I know we had our differences a few years back, but this is bigger than that. This is about family loyalty and doing the right thing. You've done well for yourself, and now it's time to step up and support your sister." The word son, after years of silence, was particularly galling. Actually, Mom mentioned $45,000, but I'm curious about the total budget. "How much is this wedding costing?" "That's not really your concern," he said stiffly. "We're asking each family member to contribute what they can afford. $45,000 seems reasonable for someone in your position." "My position?" "You've got that restaurant probably pulling in good money. You can afford to help out your sister." I took a deep breath, realizing that they had no idea about the actual scope of my success. To them, I was still the disappointing son who had chosen food service over education, probably scraping by with a small business that barely paid the bills. "What if I told you I could afford more than $45,000? I said. Dad's tone immediately brightened. "Well, if you're in a position to be more generous, Sarah would certainly appreciate it." "What did you have in mind?" "I'm thinking $145,000 would really make the wedding spectacular." The silence was longer this time. When Dad spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "That's very generous, Jim. Very generous indeed. Sarah will be thrilled." "I haven't said yes yet," I clarified. "I said I could afford it. Whether I choose to spend it is a different question." "What do you mean?" Mom's voice was back on the line, apparently listening on another extension. "I mean, I need to think about it. $145,000 is a significant amount of money. I want to make sure I'm investing it wisely." Investing. Dad's voice carried a note of irritation. "This isn't an investment. This is family support." "Everything's an investment, Dad. The question is what kind of return you expect. When I needed $12,000 for college, what kind of return were you expecting on that investment?" Jim, Mom said warningly, this isn't the time for old grievances. Actually, this is exactly the time, I said. You're asking me to demonstrate family loyalty by writing a check for $145,000. I'm just trying to understand how family loyalty worked when the situation was reversed. Neither parent responded immediately. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We'll call you back after we've had time to discuss this, he said curtly. Take your time, I said. I'm not going anywhere. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the financial reports scattered across my desk. Amy walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and immediately noticed my expression. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I told her about the phone call, the wedding request, and the casual assumption that I should be grateful for the opportunity to fund Sarah's celebration. Amy listened without interruption, her expression growing more incredulous with each detail. So, let me get this straight, she said when I finished. They refused to help with your college costs, kicked you out of the house, haven't spoken to you in 3 years, and now they want you to pay more than 10 times what they refused to give you for your education. That's about right? And they think this is reasonable because it's family, I said, mimicking my mother's tone. Amy shook her head slowly. Jim, I know they're your parents, but this is not normal family behavior. This is exploitation. I know, I said. The question is how to respond. You could just say no. I could, but I think there's a better approach. They've given me an opportunity to settle this once and for all, to show them exactly what their choices cost them. Amy's eyes lit up with understanding. You're going to the wedding. We're going to the wedding, I corrected. I want them to meet my fiancé. I want them to see what I've built. And I want to give them an answer they'll never forget. As we began planning our trip to Sarah's Hawaiian wedding, I felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with family reconciliation and everything to do with justice finally being served. The flight to Maui gave me 8 hours to prepare for what would either be the most satisfying moment of my adult life or a complete disaster. Amy squeezed my hand as we descended through the clouds toward the tropical island where my sister was about to have the wedding of her dreams, funded by parents who had once claimed they couldn't afford to help with my education. You sure about this plan? Amy asked as we gathered our carry-on bags. Completely sure, I said. They want to play family loyalty games. Let's play. We checked into our resort, a luxury property that had cost me more for 3 nights than my parents had paid me for 3 months of work at the cafe. The irony was perfect. I was funding my own attendance at a wedding where I was expected to provide additional funding for the couple. Sarah's rehearsal dinner was held on the hotel's oceanfront terrace with string lights and tropical flowers creating a picture-perfect setting. I hadn't seen my sister in nearly 4 years, and the young woman greeting guests bore little resemblance to the teenager I remembered. She was poised, confident, and genuinely beautiful in the way that comes from being loved and supported throughout your life. Her fiancé, David, appeared to be a decent guy from a good family, exactly the kind of person my parents would choose for their favorite child. Jim? Sarah ran toward me with arms outstretched, her face lighting up with what appeared to be genuine joy. I can't believe you're here. And you must be Amy. Mom told me so much about you. Amy and I exchanged glances. Mom had never met Amy and knew nothing about her beyond what they might have heard through family gossip. It's so nice to finally meet you, Amy said graciously. Congratulations on your wedding. Everything looks beautiful. Thank you. I'm so happy you both could make it. Jim, there are so many people here who want to see you. Everyone's been asking about your restaurant business. As Sarah led us toward the main group of family members, I noticed my parents watching our approach with expressions I couldn't quite read. Dad looked older than I remembered, his hair now completely gray and his posture slightly stooped. Mom appeared nervous, fidgeting with her jewelry and smoothing her dress repeatedly. "Look who I found," Sarah announced to the group. Jim and Amy made it. Uncle Robert and Aunt Lisa greeted me warmly, as did several cousins I hadn't seen since that disastrous New Year's Eve confrontation. The extended family seemed genuinely happy to see me asking questions about my business and congratulating me on my success. "We heard you opened a restaurant," Uncle Robert said. "How's that going?" "Very well," I replied. "We're actually expanding into catering and event planning. This wedding would be the kind of event we'd love to handle." "Really?" Sarah's eyes widened with interest. "What would something like this cost through your company?" I pretended to consider the question seriously. "For a 3-day destination wedding with 150 guests. Full catering planning and coordination. Probably around $200,000, including travel and accommodation costs for staff." Several family members whistled in appreciation of the number. Sarah looked slightly overwhelmed. "Wow," she said. "That's more than our entire wedding budget." "Destination weddings are expensive," I said casually. "But they create memories that last a lifetime. That's what makes them worth the investment." During dinner, I found myself seated between Amy and my cousin Jennifer, with a clear view of my parents at the head table. They kept glancing in my direction, clearly wondering when I would provide an answer about the financial contribution they had requested. "So, Jim," Jennifer said between courses, "your parents mentioned you might be helping with wedding costs. That's so generous of you." "We'll see," I said. "I'm still deciding how much I want to contribute." "Any amount would be meaningful," she continued. "I know Sarah and David would appreciate anything you can offer." After dinner, Dad approached our table with what he probably thought was a casual manner. "Jim, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" We walked to a quiet corner of the terrace overlooking the ocean. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, creating a backdrop that would have been romantic under different circumstances. "Son, I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished," he began. "Your mother and I always knew you had potential." The revisionist history was stunning. I let him continue without interruption. "We know we made some mistakes when you were younger. Maybe we could have handled things differently. But you turned out well despite our concerns. You proved us wrong, and I respect that." "Is this an apology, Dad?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm saying we're family, and family supports each other. Sarah's wedding is important to all of us. Your contribution would mean a lot." "How much did you tell people I was contributing?" His face reddened slightly. "We may have mentioned that you were considering a substantial donation. People are expecting you to step up." "So you've already committed my money without asking me?" Not committed," he said quickly. "Just indicated that you were in a position to help." I nodded slowly, letting him think I was considering his words. "I'll give you my answer at the reception," I said, finally. Dad looked frustrated but nodded. "Fair enough. Just remember what this means to Sarah." The wedding ceremony the next day was undeniably beautiful. Sarah looked radiant as she walked down a petal-strewn aisle toward an altar decorated with tropical flowers. David's vows were heartfelt and sincere. The setting was picture perfect with waves lapping at the shore and tropical birds providing a natural soundtrack. As I watched my sister promise to love and honor her new husband, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of me was genuinely happy for her. She deserved love and celebration. But another part of me couldn't forget that this elaborate display of family devotion was funded by the same parents who had claimed poverty when I needed basic educational support. During the cocktail reception that followed, extended family members continued to approach me with hints and suggestions about my expected contribution. Word had clearly spread that I was supposed to make a grand gesture of family loyalty. "Sarah's so lucky to have such a successful brother," Aunt Lisa said meaningfully. "I'm sure you're planning something special for her." "Oh, I am," I assured her. "Very special." The reception dinner was held in the resort's grand ballroom with round tables draped in white linens and centerpieces of exotic flowers. Amy and I were seated at a table with family friends who spent the meal asking about our restaurant and our own wedding plans. "When are you two getting married?" asked Mrs. Patterson, a longtime family friend. "Next spring," Amy replied. "We're planning a small ceremony followed by a dinner at our restaurant for close family and friends." "How lovely. Will it be expensive?" "Not particularly," I said. "We're more focused on celebrating with people we care about than creating an elaborate production." The comment was intended for my parents who were listening from the adjacent table. As dinner concluded, the DJ announced that the father of the bride would like to say a few words. Dad stood up with a champagne flute in his hand, looking every inch the proud patriarch celebrating his daughter's happiness. "Friends and family," he began. "Today, we celebrate the union of two wonderful young people. Sarah has always been our pride and joy, and seeing her marry David fills our hearts with happiness." He continued with the standard father of the bride sentiments, but then his speech took an unexpected turn. "I also want to acknowledge the family members who helped make this celebration possible. Weddings like this don't happen without the support of people who love you, and we're grateful for everyone who contributed to making Sarah's dreams come true." His eyes found mine across the room as he continued. "In particular, I want to thank those family members who stepped up in a big way. Your generosity means everything to Sarah and David, and it shows what family loyalty really looks like." The implication was clear. He was preemptively thanking me for a contribution he assumed I would make, putting social pressure on me to live up to his public expectations. As applause filled the room, I realized this was the perfect moment. Dad had just given me the opening I needed to settle our account once and for all. I stood up slowly, raising my own champagne glass. "If I could add something to Dad's remarks," I said loudly enough for the entire room to hear. The ballroom quieted as attention turned to me. Sarah looked curious and pleased that her big brother wanted to contribute to the celebration. Dad's expression was expectant and satisfied. Amy squeezed my hand under the table, knowing that years of frustration were about to be channeled into a single perfect moment of justice. "I'd like to talk about family loyalty and what it really means," I began. The ballroom was completely silent as I stood with my champagne glass raised, looking out at a room full of family and friends who had no idea they were about to witness the settling of a years-old debt. Family loyalty is a beautiful thing. I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. It means being there for each other during challenging times. It means investing in each other's dreams and potential. It means making sacrifices so that the people you love can succeed. Sarah beamed at me, thinking I was building toward a touching tribute. Dad nodded approvingly, convinced I was about to announce a generous financial contribution. Mom clutched her purse nervously, sensing something in my tone that didn't match the words. When I graduated from high school 4 years ago, I learned a lot about family loyalty. I continued. I was accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship. I needed $12,000 to cover the remaining costs for my first year. I went to my parents excited to share my achievement and hoping for their support. The room remained quiet, but I could see confusion starting to register on some faces. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected for a wedding toast. My father looked me in the eye and told me they wouldn't pay a single dollar for my college education. He said I should stay and work at the family cafe because that was my future. My mother agreed with him. Sarah's smile faltered. Extended family members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dad's face had gone pale, but he couldn't interrupt without creating an even bigger scene. At the time, they claimed they couldn't afford to help with my education. They said money was tight, and they needed me to work at the cafe to help support the family. I believed them because I trusted them. Amy reached up and squeezed my free hand, providing silent support as I continued. Later, I discovered they had $18,000 saved in an account labeled Sarah's Future Fund. They weren't poor. They had simply decided that one child's education was worth investing in, while the other child's education was not. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Sarah's face went white as she began to understand the implications of what I was revealing. Uncle Robert and Aunt Lisa looked shocked and uncomfortable. When I confronted them about this discrepancy, they kicked me out of the house on New Year's Eve in front of all of you. They told family members that I was ungrateful and had abandoned them. They revised the story of my academic achievements to make it seem like college wasn't appropriate for someone with my practical skills. Dad tried to stand up, but I continued before he could speak. So I left. I moved out, enrolled in community college as an independent student, and worked multiple jobs to pay for my education. I graduated summa cum laude with a business degree. I started a food truck business that grew into 3 trucks. Last year, I opened Romano's Downtown Kitchen, which generates more revenue in a month than the family cafe earns in a year. The room was completely silent now. Several family members were staring at my parents with expressions of disbelief and disapproval. Amy and I employ 26 people. We're expanding into catering and event planning. We're engaged to be married next spring, and we're building a life based on mutual respect and shared dreams. I paused, looking directly at my parents before continuing. 3 days ago, my mother called me for the first time in 3 years. Not to apologize, not to congratulate me on my success, not to ask how I was doing. She called to request that I contribute $45,000 to Sarah's wedding expenses. When I suggested I might be able to afford more, my father immediately asked for $145,000. Sarah covered her face with her hands, clearly mortified. David put his arm around her protectively, looking angry on her behalf. $145,000, I repeated. More than 12 times the amount they refused to provide for my education. They wanted me to demonstrate family loyalty by funding a celebration for someone who never called to ask how I was doing during the most challenging years of my life. I turned to address Sarah directly. Sarah, I want to be clear that none of this is your fault. You deserve a beautiful wedding and a happy marriage. You also deserve to know the truth about how differently we were treated and what that cost our family. Then I turned back to address the room. My parents asked me to contribute to this wedding, and I've decided to honor their request. I'm going to give Sarah exactly the same amount they gave me for my college education. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. $0.00. I announced, placing the empty envelope on the head table. Just like they told me when I needed their support, I believe people should earn their own way and pay for their own dreams. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Some family members looked embarrassed. Others appeared angry. Sarah was crying quietly while David comforted her. However, I continued, I do have a gift for Sarah and David that bypasses the people who created this situation. I pulled out a check from my other pocket. This is a check for $25,000 to pay off Sarah's student loans. It's made out directly to her loan servicer, so the money can only be used for its intended purpose. Sarah, you shouldn't have to start your marriage burdened by debt created by other people's poor financial planning. Sarah looked up through her tears, her expression shifting from humiliation to gratitude. I'm also offering you both positions at Romano's downtown kitchen. If you're interested in working for a family business that values education, treats employees with respect, and believes in investing in people's potential rather than limiting it. I raised my glass one final time. To Sarah and David. May your marriage be built on honesty, mutual support, and the kind of family loyalty that lifts people up instead of holding them down. As I sat down, the ballroom erupted in confused applause. Some people were clapping enthusiastically, others were clapping politely out of uncertainty about what had just happened. Dad was red-faced and furious, but couldn't respond without confirming everything I had said. Mom was crying, though whether from shame or anger wasn't clear. Sarah stood up abruptly and walked directly to our table. Jim, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I never knew any of this. I know you didn't, I said, standing to hug her. That's not your fault. The student loan payment. She continued. That's incredibly generous, but I can't accept it knowing how they treated you. Yes, you can, I said firmly. This isn't about them anymore. This is about you and David starting your life together without unnecessary financial burdens. Take the gift and use it to build something better than what came before. David joined us, extending his hand to me. Thank you, he said simply, for the gift and for the job offer. We'll definitely consider it. Over the next hour, extended family members approached me with a mixture of apologies and explanations. Many of them had suspected something was wrong with the official family narrative, but hadn't known the details. We should have asked more questions, Uncle Robert said quietly. We knew you were smart and capable. It never made sense that you would just give up on college. You couldn't have known, I assured him. They were very careful about controlling the story. Near the end of the reception, my parents finally approached our table. Dad's earlier bluster had been replaced by something that might have been humility. Jim, he said quietly, we need to talk. Actually, we don't, I replied calmly. Everything that needed to be said has been said. You made your choices, and I made mine. You asked me to contribute to Sarah's wedding, and I did exactly what you taught me to do. Mom tried to interject, but I held up my hand. I'm not your son in any way that matters, I said without anger. Sons are supported, encouraged, and invested in. I was cheap labor that you tried to keep trapped in a situation that served your needs rather than mine. We made mistakes, Dad admitted. Maybe we can work on rebuilding our relationship. I looked at these two people who had shaped my early life through their limitations and rejections. For years, I had carried anger and resentment about their treatment. Tonight, I felt only pity for what they had lost through their own choices. The relationship we might have had ended when you chose humiliation over honesty, I said. But I want you to know something important. Your rejection gave me the greatest gift possible. It forced me to become completely self-reliant and taught me to value people who believe in my potential rather than trying to limit it. I gestured toward Amy, who had been listening with quiet support. This remarkable woman and I are building a life together based on mutual respect and shared dreams. We employ people who work for us because they want to, not because they're trapped by family obligation. We're creating the kind of business and family that invests in potential rather than exploiting it. Dad opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. You can't afford to lose the cafe, can you? I asked. You mortgaged everything for Sarah's education and wedding, and now you're facing bankruptcy. Their expressions confirmed what I had suspected. I could buy the cafe from you, I continued. I could pay off your debts and give you a comfortable retirement, but I won't. Just like you told me years ago, I believe people should solve their own problems and earn their own way. The parallel was perfect and devastating. They had taught me this lesson, and now they were receiving it back with interest. However, I said, Sarah and David are welcome to work for me if they want to learn how to run a successful family business. I'll teach them everything you never taught me about treating people with dignity and investing in their success. As Amy and I left the reception hand in hand, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice finally being served. 6 months later, Sarah and David moved to our city and joined Romano's downtown kitchen as management trainees. Sarah proved to be brilliant at customer service and operations management. David brought financial skills that helped us expand into new markets. My parents lost the cafe and had to sell their house to avoid bankruptcy. Extended family members offered assistance, but only after they acknowledged their mistakes and apologized for their treatment of me. Amy and I were married in a simple ceremony at our restaurant, surrounded by the people who had supported our dreams and believed in our potential. Sarah served as a bridesmaid, having become the sister I had always hoped she could be once she understood the truth about our family dynamics. During my wedding toast, I shared the most important lesson I had learned. Success isn't measured by how much money you accumulate or how much approval you gain from people who never believed in you. Success is measured by the quality of relationships you build with people who value your potential and support your dreams. My parents never apologized for their treatment or acknowledged the damage their favoritism had caused. But I no longer needed their approval or validation. I had built a life filled with people who believed in me, supported my ambitions, and shared my vision for the future. The greatest revenge against people who tried to limit your potential isn't proving them wrong. It's building a life so fulfilling that their limitations become irrelevant. Looking back, I'm grateful for their rejection. It taught me to value authentic relationships over obligatory ones, to build success through merit rather than entitlement, and to create the kind of family business that invests in people's potential rather than exploiting their loyalty. Amy and I now have 2 restaurants, a thriving catering company, and plans to open a culinary school that will provide scholarships for students whose families can't afford to support their education. We're building the kind of legacy that lifts people up instead of holding them down. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is the motivation to build something better than what they offered. My parents taught me that lesson, and I'll be grateful for it for the rest of my life. What would you do if your family refused to support your dreams, but later expected you to fund theirs? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family obstacles and building success on your own terms. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's limitations. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the people who believe in you least give you the greatest motivation to prove what you're truly capable of achieving.